How you doing? And welcome to another edition of Preps Plus Extra. I'm Mark Stewart, prep editor of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Joining me again, J.R. Ratcliffe, sports editor of Now Newspapers. How you doing this week?
I'm doing good. I saw a couple great games this past week. On Tuesday, I saw New Berlin Eisenhower pretty much take control of the Woodland. The boys basketball team against Pewaukee in a really close one. Saw Mukwonago Catholic Memorial on Friday, so a lot of good basketball games to be seen here in the next couple weeks leading into the tournament.
Right. And I was with you at that Mukwonago game. We'll talk about that one a little later. But to start off the show, we had a performance for the ages on Friday night.
Definitely.
In boys basketball, Christopher Go, a senior basketball player from Mountaintop Christian, the school of about 20 students, scored 71 points in a high school basketball game, which if you go based off the WBCA records, Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Association records, that's tied for the fourth best in state history, according to what they have. But as it turns out, Mountaintop Christian, since it's not a WIAA school, that mark probably isn't going to be recognized by the WBCA. And I guess that leads to the question of, should it? I mean, you got a high school kid who's has a high school performance in Wisconsin. You got any opinion on that one?
Yeah, I think only because there's a slippery slope there, in that if you say, sure, it does count, you've got to think about a lot of other things that now come into play. I mean, say because they're not governed by WIAA rules, they can have different practice times from other teams, they can play more games, fewer games, whatever. Do you then have to look at career records and say a guy scores the most points in state history in a career, but his team played 3 more games every year or 4 more games? I think that the reason this would be excluded is because of the implication. There's a lot of stuff that we don't even know about that you would have to start talking about. In the context of a single game, unless there's something unusual about that game, I mean, basketball is basketball. It's still 32 minutes of high school ball, and it's really hard to score 71 points no matter how good you are, how bad the opponent is. So I still look at that and say that's a heck of an accomplishment. You certainly should think about it in that context. I can understand why the WBCA wants to keep their records separate.
Right. I've kind of gone back and forth on this because my initial thought was, okay, it's a high school athlete doing this in a high school game. It should be part of the record book, but as you noted, you made some pretty good points there in terms of not only difference in schedule, which we really don't know in the case of a lot of these small schools that aren't a part of the WIAA, but like say practice times. I mean, maybe there's certain, I assume Christopher is a normal high school age student, and that's what I've heard. Like he's 25 or 22 years old going up against high school kids. I don't think that's the case, but you don't know.
Right.
And there are, so, I guess the more I think about it, it probably is wise for the WBCA to keep those, records separate. I do think it'd be nice to somehow, acknowledge that it happened.
Right.
Because, even though those schools, some of those tiny schools in Indian Trails, they put up a lot of points, and specifically some of the better players, because I think there's a greater difference between, the good players and the poorer ones. They put up some big numbers in that conference. So, like I said, I think it's probably best just to, it'd be nice to acknowledge, the effort there. So
consider it's a strange category, points in a game, because if you have a mismatch, and we have many of them every night in prep sports, when you get a really good player against a really bad team, if that really good player is scoring 50, 60 points, it's probably because he played the whole game, and he played hard the whole game after a point when the disparity became such that it wasn't worth having that guy on the floor anymore. So, it's not even one of those things you really want. You don't want to be that team that has a guy who scores 60 points against a really inferior opponent.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember the final score of that Mountaintop Christian game, but I think they won by 50, like 105 to 56 over Eastbrook Academy, which is a WIAA school, by the way, just one of the smaller ones. So, switching gears here, it's football signing day, and though we're still talking basketball, there's one team in the area that it's a nice mix of football and basketball, and that's the Mukwonago Indians, which have a number of football standouts who are really good basketball players. As you noted earlier, we saw them play Catholic Memorial on Friday night.
Right.
What, aside from the physicality, what stands out to you about that squad?
Just in the fact that front line, that you're not going to get a bigger one in the conference, and maybe even in the area, certainly in the conference. And we're talking about their big three. That's Nate Tangway, Nick Blohm, and Dominic Cizauskas. Excellent rebounding team, as you might expect, because they're bigger than most of their opponents. not necessarily height, but definitely width and
Right.
and strength. So they're able to really physically outmatch a lot of opponents. And what we saw against Catholic Memorial is that they can run the floor, because Catholic Memorial threw a lot of pressure at them, and that was a big battle. CMH just came off a win against Arrowhead, tied with Mukwonago for first place now in the Classic 8. CMH was a game behind, absolutely had a seat at the table of the best teams in the Classic 8. And so that game figured to be a dogfight. Mukwonago comes in there and actually just blew them out in their own gym, in Memorial's own gym, mainly because they were able to break the press, and these guys can run up and down the floor, a dimension that makes them just very dangerous. You look at their sectional, they have a chance to get all the way to the sectional final, pretty much uncontested. No disrespect to a lot of the teams there, but this is a great opportunity for them, and they would face one of the Madison schools in the sectional final. But this is a team that's very dangerous in the postseason.
Yeah, and a couple of things stood out to me, obviously, just in terms of them being so physical, is that, a lot of those guys, Nate Tangway or Blom or whoever, once they get the ball in the post and they got settled, they were scoring. I mean,
Right.
you're not really knocking these guys off their point where they're going to miss a shot inside. And then the other part was, I was really impressed to see, Tangway's, he's a 6'5", 6'6", probably what you think about 250,
Sure.
Pound, defensive end in football. All-state player in football, and he's bringing the ball up the court.
Yeah.
He's shooting threes. I was really impressed with what I saw from him in that game. Speaking of the Indians, let's hear what they had to say about their victory over Catholic Memorial.
We're on the second stretch of our conference season. CMH, huge game. I mean, every game from now on out just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, this one, try not to admit it, but this one did feel a lot better. After them come off a huge win, and we kind of struggled in the month of January, so it was nice to start February off with a big conference win.
Our coach just told us, you guys better get in there because you have so much a size advantage. Just get in there and keep banging, and we got in there and out-rebounded them. In the first quarter, our coach said, come out strong. You're in their home. They want a piece of you. So, we had to come out strong and just show them what we're made of.
The functioning of your press break and not having your point guard and still being able to do what you were able to do and run them up.
Yeah, our coach told us get the ball to the middle, look up the floor. They can't guard everybody, and so we just got the ball to the middle and just executed what our coach told us. Just like Blum said, every game is the game to win, and every game is basically the conference championship, because if you lose one, Arrowhead wins. That's just their conference championship then.
Well, next week, Mukwonago is part of what I'll call Super Tuesday, which
It's a dangerous phrase in WIAA sports.
Yeah, this is a good Super Tuesday. Next Tuesday, there's in addition to Mukwonago facing Arrowhead for what will determine the Classic 8 conference title, a number of great matchups in boys basketball. Wisconsin and Lutheran and Slinger. That's probably going to decide the Wisconsin Little 10. Milwaukee Hamilton versus Milwaukee King, which is going to help decide the city conference. There's a lot that's going to have to go on there.
Brookfield Central, Sussex Hamilton, and
How
the greater metro.
how can we forget about
That'll
Brookfield?
be a big one as well.
Yeah, and that one's gonna either Sussex Hamilton's gonna probably win that league outright, or
Right.
Brookfield Central's gonna get revenge, and they're gonna maybe ultimately end up tying for the championship.
Right.
So that's one thing to look forward to coming up. We also got seed meetings coming up.
Yeah, it'll be a great postscript to the Sunday seed meetings where you finally get the brackets. You can finally sort of chart out who's gonna match up in the sectionals, and that's coming up already even before these big games are played. So it's a little. It happens every year. It's a little unfortunate because you don't get the whole picture when you put the seeds together. That's just the way it goes. It's the way it has to be for getting scheduling purposes squared away early. But I'm certainly excited to see what the WIAA produces.
Yeah, and one team that has certainly earned themselves a high seed is Racine Case. The Eagles won a share of the Southeast Conference title last week. Let's hear what D'Angelo Jackson had to say about the win.
Man, it feels good, man. They haven't been recorded since like 3 years ago. So I feel happy about my team. We did really well, man. A lot of defense. That's what really got into us. Coach told us our main focus is defense, and we did really well on that. So
we'll give D'Angelo the final word this week. That's going to wrap up another edition of Preps Plus Extra. For more Preps Plus action, be sure to watch me and Lance Allen every Sunday night on today's TMJ4. Till next time, I'm Mark Stewart. That's J.R. Radcliffe.